Hi there. Over the past few months in our Conquer videos, I have focused on the way that you think, such as conquering limiting beliefs and conquering the should mindset. And I hope you realize by now that it's not just your husband's thinking that is sometimes off. It may also be yours. And I want you to learn to pay attention not only what you think about and the stories you tell yourself, but also the way that you think. So in this Conquer video and the next one, I'm going to dive a little deeper into something that's called common thinking errors. And these errors will continually keep you stuck in lies, being miserable, and feeling unhealthy. Remember, our first step in building core strength is being courageously committed to truth. But you can't live or walk in the truth until you first recognize when you're not. Now, in our December Conquer video, I talked about your limiting beliefs. And remember, I wore my sunglasses to illustrate how we see determines what we see. And I said if the lenses we look through are green, then we would likely mistake this lemon for a lime, right? But once you realized that you had these green glasses on, then you would be less likely to make that same mistake again, because now when you saw something that looked like a lime, you'd press pause and say, is this really a lime? Just because it's green and it might look like a lime, now that I know that I have green glasses on and that I know yellow appears green, is it possible that this could be a lemon? And maybe I need to find some other information to help me know what the truth is here. Now, what I want to do is review some key concepts about your thought life that we've covered in other Conquer videos, but I want to put it all together here. And the first is, not everything you think about or everything that goes through your mind, although you rarely question it, is the truth. Yet the Bible tells us that our thinking is off by nature. We exchange the truth of God for a lie, and that the heart is naturally deceptive, even toward our own selves. Second, if you're going to grow into a healthier, mature person, it's crucial that you become aware not only of what you think and the lies that you believe, but also the patterns around the way that you think. For example, some people tend to think negatively, just by their nature or personality. It's called glass half empty thinking, or having a pessimistic outlook. And these kinds of thinkers tend to be worriers, because all they can see are the negative things that could happen out there in this scary, crazy world. They don't tend to notice much of the positive around them if they're not intentional about it, because their glasses are negative. And so the positive things can go right past them because their eyeglasses, or the lenses in which they see, is only showing them what's wrong. Now, if you recognize yourself here, don't beat yourself up, because I tend to this kind of thinking too, and it has some positive aspects. It's what makes me a good counselor and a diagnostician, because I can see clearly what's wrong in people's life. However, my ability to see what's wrong or what could be wrong also has a downside. My kids have told me I have a disease. They've labeled it worst case scenario disease, because I always think of what negative things might happen. For example, for me, being a worst case scenario thinker, I used to have a very miserable night thinking about all the awful things that could happen to my 16-year-old daughter when she went out driving our family car to her volleyball game. Like she could get a flat tire or get stuck in a snowdrift, and then someone bad might offer to help her, someone impersonating a police officer. And they might trick her into opening her door, and the thoughts take over, and as a mom, you start to have an anxiety attack. On the other hand, my husband tends to lean toward the opposite spectrum. He's a positive thinker, an optimist by nature. And he suffers a whole lot less than I do, because he rarely thinks about what could go wrong. Because he sees things, the glass is always half full. And here's a very simple example of the different ways we would see the exact same event. When my kids would be in the car, we'd be taking a long trip to Chicago, and they'd be getting antsy, and why know how much longer? It was amusing to me to hear my husband and I come out on opposite ends of the spectrum. Of course, me, the pessimistic thinker, would always overestimate how much longer it would take, and my husband, the optimist, would always underestimate how much time it would take. And both of us were usually wrong. Now, this was before GPSs and cell phones told you exactly how much time was left before you reached your destination. But my point is, once I recognized that my natural thinking pattern leaned toward pessimism and sometimes even negativity, I stopped giving it so much power in my life as the truth, because I realized I had these negative glasses on that weren't always telling me the truth about what I was seeing. Now, the third thing, your thoughts, both what you think about and the ways that you think, impact your emotions and a lot of your decisions. Psalm 55:2 says, "My thoughts trouble me and I am distraught." And the stories we tell ourselves about what happened or what's happening or what might happen tend to run in themes. And so it would be wise to pay attention because, again, in my own life, once I recognized what I was doing to myself by my worst case scenario disease kind of thinking, I found I could change the channel. And when I changed the channel and didn't meditate on all those kind of horrible things that might happen, guess what? I stopped feeling so much anxiety about what might happen. Now, don't get me wrong. Could some of those awful things I imagined really happen? Yes. But thinking about them all night didn't prevent them. It just made me miserable. And just as an aside, my daughter Amanda, who is now 35 years old, not once did she have any of those bad things happen to her. So all my worrying and fretting and anxious nights took their toll on me, but were based on my own negative thinking patterns and not on real life events. The Bible tells us that much of our spiritual and emotional growth comes from learning to see things in a new way. The Bible calls it renewing your mind or cleaning off your lenses. In other words, in order to grow, you must recognize and sometimes even question the way that you think, as well as what you think, so that you can challenge it to line up with the truth, because what? Jesus tells us the truth sets us free. And so once I stopped my negative storytelling about everything that might go wrong, I felt a whole lot better. Now, I've talked about these 3 points in previous Conquer videos, but let me just remind you of the tool I've given you to identify your thoughts and your feelings. It's that situation, thoughts, and feelings chart. So let's do an example. You're in a traffic jam and you feel anxious and frustrated and angry, not because of the traffic, but because of the thoughts that you're having. This is terrible. This shouldn't be happening to me. Why me? I'm going to be late. Or maybe your kids are talking back to you as a situation for you and you're feeling anxious and angry and you feel hurt, but you're telling yourself, my kid hates me. I'm a bad mom. I can't stand this. Why do they do this? This is awful. Or maybe your husband's cheated and you feel hurt and angry and sad, guilty, maybe some shame. Because your husband cheated? Not exactly. It's because you're telling yourself things about your husband cheating, such as, it must be my fault. I'm not attractive enough. I'll never recover from this. Things will never change. I'll never be happy again. Those are all ways that you're interpreting or you're reading your husband cheating that impacts your emotional life. Now, please don't misunderstand. We all think things sometimes. That's not the problem. The problem is that we don't recognize what we're doing, and therefore we get stuck in our own story or negative pattern without being able to do anything to change it. We keep waiting for the situation to change. If only the traffic got better, or my kids treated me better, or my spouse didn't cheat on me. If they changed, then I'd feel better. But that's not true. Sometimes it's just changing our thought life or the way that we're seeing something, or the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation that we're in that needs to change. For example, you can't change the fact that your husband cheated on you, and that does make you feel sad or angry or hurt. But if you're telling yourself a story also that is all your fault, or it's because you weren't attractive enough, or perhaps your negative thinking pattern leads you to think because he cheated on you that that's the end of your marriage, or you'll never be able to recover, or that you'll never be able to forgive him or trust him again, that's just not true, at least not for now. You don't know that. And if you stop thinking that way, you may still feel sad and angry because he cheated. But just maybe you won't feel as guilty or shamed or scared or hopeless as you might if you added those extra thoughts that may not be true. So in this video, I'm going to give you 3 of the most common patterns of unhealthy thinking. And then in our next Conquer video, I'm going to give you 5 more. And what I want you to do is to ask yourself if the way that you think might contain some of these errors. And the first is all or nothing thinking. For example, well, if I didn't win, well, then I lost. Or if I didn't get an A, then I did lousy work. Or if someone doesn't love me the most, then they don't love me at all. If I don't succeed at this, then I'm a failure. If you lied to me once, then I can't trust you with anything. If you're not right, then you must be wrong. For a person who thinks like this, there are no shades of gray. Everything is either black or white, right or wrong, good or bad. Here's a familiar one I'm sure you have heard from your spouse. If you tell me something's wrong with me or criticize me, oh, I guess I can't do anything to please you, or I'm doing anything right. Sound familiar? I have a friend who has this pattern of thinking. It just comes naturally to her, just like my pessimistic outlook comes naturally to me. Her outlook on things is very black or white. She just doesn't see the gray. things are either right or wrong, black or white, good or bad. But that's not really true. Sometimes you can be both right and wrong. Or some things can be both bad and good. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you turn out to be life-changing in good ways. It's not always either or. Sometimes it's both and. And so when my friend and I talk about things, she gets a new perspective. Now, I personally don't have this thinking error of all or nothing. I see all kinds of possibilities. And so my friend, who does, calls me her gray friend because I see all the gray. And she reaches out and connects with me when she needs to find the shades of gray in things. Because she knows she has these all or nothing glasses on and she can overreact when all she can see is the all or nothing category. And knowing that she tends to think this way helps her recognize that she may not always be right and the other person may not always be wrong. And therefore she presses pause and asks others who have more varied perspectives for their thoughts on things before making critical decisions. Now, if your spouse or someone you are close to has this thinking pattern of all or nothing, it can be very challenging to live with this person. And it's also challenging to keep your own thoughts about you when the other person is so confident that you're wrong and he's right, or you're bad and he's good. Especially when you do see shades of gray, where you can see both wrong on some things and that you're both right on some things. But a person with an all or nothing thinking error doesn't see those shades of gray, just like the person with green glasses never notices that the lemon is really a lime. Therefore, conversations or compromises are often impossible with someone who has this patterned way of thinking and doesn't realize it. Now, the second thinking pattern I want to talk to you about is overgeneralizing things. And this gets you into trouble. In other words, if something is true here, it's true everywhere. If it's bad here, it's bad everywhere. For example, if you were a student and failed your math test, generalizing that would say, I'm just lousy at math. Or if you didn't get a job, well, that means I'm never going to find the job I want. Or if you're abused by a man, it means all men are abusers. Or if you're criticized about something, it means I'm no good at anything. I can't do anything right. I'm a lousy mother or spouse. And what's scary about this kind of thinking error is when you do it a lot, that thinking becomes your reality. So if you fail a math test and tell yourself I'm no good at math, and I'm never going to be good at math, that sort of shapes your future, doesn't it? In math, anyway. Or if my child criticizes me, or my boss corrects something I've done wrong, and I tell myself, I'm never going to live up to their standards, and they're expecting way too much of me, and I just can't do it. What kinds of decisions will I make? Or performance will I have from that point of view? Or let's look at it from a different angle. If I succeed at something, and I play a great game at pickleball, or maybe have a wonderful conversation with your husband, and then you tell yourself, sheesh, everything is great. I don't have to work at this anymore. I've arrived. Well, then what kind of behaviors might you express with that storyline? So here's how to pay attention if you're doing this. List the fact of a situation, such as you failed a test, or maybe you aced a test. How do you feel? Well, if you failed, you feel horrible. If you aced it, you probably feel wonderful. But what's that middle column? What are your thoughts? Well, if you failed, you're probably saying something like, I can't do this. And if you aced it, you might say, I'm smart. I'm great at this. I'm the man or I'm the woman. If your thoughts are along the line of that, I'm great, then perhaps you're overgeneralizing. If your thoughts are along lines of effort, I should have studied harder, or wow, my study really paid off, then chances are you're not overgeneralizing. Now, I often find women who are separated and reconcile prematurely have generalization as a thinking error. He's nice to me today, so that means he gets it, or he's changed. Not necessarily. Now, he's nice to me is much better than he's not nice to me or he's mean to me, but it doesn't mean anything about the big picture yet. Don't overgeneralize. A third and related thinking error is our tendency to filter out the positive or negative from our experience. Now, those who tend to filter out the negative feel much better than those of us who filter out the positive, but both can lead to problems. So here are some examples of filtering out the positive. Let's say that your friend asks you how Christmas went, and you say, terrible. People were so rude. My husband drank too much. I didn't like anything anybody bought me. It didn't snow. It was just a terrible day. But if we were to have a camera in your house that day, there might have been several or even many positive things that happened too. But you just didn't notice them. You filtered them all out and just felt the negative ones. Or perhaps you went in for your job review and you got some great positive comments from your boss, but one negative. And all you remember is the negative, and you're caught in a cycle of despair and anxiety about how your boss felt you were a poor performer because you filtered out all the other positive comments. If this thinking error rings true for you, it's important to intentionally look for the positive things you can be grateful for, because by doing this, you're balancing your natural tendency to only focus on the bad stuff. I think that's why the Apostle Paul, who was no stranger to bad days or bad things happening to him, says to us in Philippians, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your glasses, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things that are excellent and worthy of praise, and keep putting into practice all you've learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. So, your assignment for this Conquer video is to pay attention to your thought patterns. Do they tend towards all or nothing, overgeneralization, or filtering out the positive? If so, okay, don't beat yourself up, because recognizing it is the first step. Because now that you know that you have these particular glasses on that color the way that you see things, you know what to do. Start practicing other ways of thinking. Challenge the way you're looking at something. Find alternative points of view. In other words, if you're black and white, practice looking for the gray, or ask a gray friend to help you, like my friend does with me. If you overgeneralize, stick with the facts. Stop making the facts into a bigger story about how worthy or unworthy you are as a person. And if you filter out the positive, develop a habit of looking for the good in your day, in your child, even in your husband. No one is all bad or all good. But when we filter out the positive, then all we see is one side, which can affect your mood, your relationships, and your future. In our next Conquer video, I'm going to go through 5 more common ways we tend to think that keep us unhealthy. So until next time, practice taking care of your thinking journal. Until next time.